the secrets we keep, and the lies that unravel them. This is the story of betrayal, hidden desires, and the high price of a secret love affair that spirals out of control. The clock ticks towards Christmas Eve, 2014, in the quiet town of Leicester. But beneath the cold, festive exterior, something far darker is about to unfold. At 34 years old, Sameena was everything the world saw her as: confident, ambitious, and independent. Living in Cardiff, a vibrant city in Wales, she had built a life many could envy. As the marketing manager at Costco warehouses, Sameena was in charge of overseeing multiple locations across central England, a role that brought her respect and a comfortable salary. She appeared to have it all: a successful career, a good home, and friends who admired her. But in the deepest corners of her heart, something was missing. Sameena was lonely. It wasn't obvious to those around her, but her family and friends were starting to notice something was off. She had been hiding it for 2 years. The truth? Sameena was involved in a secret relationship, but not just with anyone. Her lover was a colleague, a 41-year-old man named Roger Cooper, who worked at Costco's Coventry branch. The affair had started innocently enough, a spark between two people who found solace in each other's company amidst the daily grind of corporate life. Roger was a man who had worked his way up the career ladder. From a modest beginning, he had become a manager at Costco, his position marking years of dedication and hard work. To Sameena, Roger was the man who understood her, who made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. But the connection they shared wasn't something they could proudly display to the world. They were forced to keep it a secret. The reasons for their secrecy were simple, yet suffocating. First, Roger was in a long-term relationship with his partner, Susan, a woman he'd been with for a decade. A loyal companion to him, Susan had no idea of the betrayal happening behind her back. Second, they both feared the consequences if their relationship became public. At Costco, like many other companies, there was a strict policy against relationships between managers and their subordinates. Sameena, being in a lower position than Roger, knew the risk: if anyone discovered their affair, it could cost them both their careers. For Sameena, this secret was becoming a prison. She loved Roger, truly, deeply, and wanted nothing more than to share her happiness with those closest to her. She yearned for the day when she wouldn't have to hide their love, when she could speak freely about the man who made her heart race. But as the months passed, the weight of their secret grew unbearable. Sameena found herself walking on eggshells, constantly worried she might slip up and mention Roger in front of the wrong person. The stress of keeping up appearances, pretending everything was normal when in reality, nothing was, began to take its toll. More and more, Sameena became impatient. She wanted a life where she could be open about their love, a life where they could finally be honest with everyone, and with themselves. She pressured Roger relentlessly, pushing him to make a decision, one that would change everything. She wanted him to choose her, to make the bold move of ending his relationship with Susan. The ultimatum was clear: either he ended things with Susan by the end of 2014, or their relationship would be over. Sameena believed that this was the only way they could be free to love openly and build the future they both dreamed of. But as Christmas Eve approached, the tension between them was palpable. Roger's indecision and the weight of his double life pushed him to the edge. Sameena was desperate. She had already invested so much emotionally in this secret romance, and now she was running out of patience. If you found this story compelling and want to stay up to date with more true crime content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps us bring more in-depth, researched stories to light. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Would Roger choose her? Or would his fear of losing everything, including his comfortable life with Susan, hold him back? Time was running out, and as the clock ticked down to Christmas, their love story was on the brink of an irreversible change. This is the story of a love that couldn't survive the pressure of its own lies. A story of choices, consequences, and the devastating impact of secrets kept too long. Stay with me as we unravel the shocking events that unfolded on that fateful Christmas Eve, and discover how a simple decision can lead to a tragedy that no one saw coming. A Christmas Eve that would change everything. Sameena Imam was a woman of determination and dreams. For months, she had fought for the love she shared with Roger Cooper, a relationship shrouded in secrecy and forbidden by the very company they worked for. But on Christmas Eve 2014, she was determined that this would be the moment it all came together, the moment she and Roger could finally be free to love openly, without fear of judgment, without hiding in the shadows. Roger had promised her that it was just a matter of time. He told her that there was nothing left with his longtime partner, Susan. He assured Sameena that by Christmas, they would be officially together, that everything would change. And Sameena, overwhelmed with hope and anticipation, believed him. She was ready to take the leap, ready to make the most of the life she envisioned with Roger. To mark the occasion, Sameena had gone to great lengths. She wasn't about to let this moment slip by unnoticed. No. She had booked a room in a luxurious hotel in Birmingham, a place where they could escape the prying eyes of the world and celebrate their love, if only for a few days. This wasn't just any roadside motel, this was a 5-star experience. She paid over £500 for a 2-night stay in the most opulent suite, making sure every detail was perfect. She even reserved a table at the hotel's high-end restaurant, eager for an unforgettable evening. This was more than just a getaway. It was a declaration, a turning point. Sameena had waited so long for this moment, longing for it to be etched into her memory as one of the happiest times of her life. She wanted these 2 days to be magical, the beginning of something real, something that could stand in the light of day. But as the clock struck 4 p.m. on that fateful day, everything started to unravel. Sameena and Roger, ever the cautious couple, left work separately, taking all the usual precautions to avoid suspicion. Their colleagues saw nothing out of the ordinary. Roger and Sameena had become experts at maintaining appearances, hiding their secret in plain sight. It had become second nature. Sameena slipped out of the office, making her way to Marks & Spencer to buy chocolates and a bottle of sparkling wine. She smiled to herself, the excitement building as she imagined the evening ahead. As she wandered the aisles of the store, her mind raced. She picked up the items she knew Roger would love, all while chatting on the phone with her sister. She confirmed the plans to visit her family in London just a couple of days later, on Boxing Day. Everything was falling into place. Or so she thought. But as she made her way to her car, a nagging feeling tugged at her. Something wasn't right, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The day had felt perfect, almost too perfect. Sameena would never make it to London. By the time her family began preparing for her arrival 2 days later, Sameena had vanished without a trace. Her phone rang unanswered. Text messages went unread. Her family, growing frantic with worry, called her repeatedly, but there was no word from her. Concern turned to panic, and soon, they reported her disappearance to the police. The search began. For days, Sameena's family, along with investigators, combed through the city in surrounding areas, hoping for any sign of her. But there was nothing. No leads. No clues. Just an eerie silence. A week later, the authorities turned their attention to Roger Cooper. Despite their best efforts to keep the affair hidden, the whispers of their relationship had not gone unnoticed. Some of Sameena's closest friends knew the truth, and their loyalty to her meant that they couldn't stay silent when it mattered most. They informed the police about the affair, and the hotel in Birmingham. It didn't take long for investigators to confirm what they feared. The hotel reservation Sameena had made for the 24th of December had gone unused. No one had checked in that evening. The room remained empty. Sameena had promised Roger that they would spend those 2 days together. But where were they? What had happened? The investigators wasted no time. They brought Roger in for questioning. His version of events was simple. He claimed that his relationship with Sameena had ended long before Christmas. According to him, Sameena was the one who was still pushing for something that wasn't there. She had been relentless, insisting that he accompany her to the hotel in Birmingham to try again, to rekindle something that Roger insisted had long since burned out. But those who knew Sameena best didn't buy it. Her close friend, a woman who had known Sameena for years, was adamant that this wasn't true. Sameena had been the happiest she'd ever been. She had talked about the future with Roger, about the love they would share once they were finally free of the shadows. There was no breakup. There was only hope. And then, there was nothing. Roger's story didn't add up. But it wasn't just the absence of Sameena that raised suspicion, it was the details, the contradictions, the way he spoke of her with an eerie detachment. It was clear he was hiding something. As the investigation unfolded, it became evident that something had gone horribly wrong on that Christmas Eve. Something that Roger was determined to conceal. And then, in a moment of revelation, Roger handed over a message. A text that Sameena had sent him that afternoon. The message read as if it was just another mundane detail in their plans for the evening, but what it revealed was much darker than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just the message that was troubling, it was the timing. It was the fact that Sameena's last known communication was with Roger, a man whose involvement in her disappearance was becoming more and more undeniable. What had really happened that Christmas Eve? Where was Sameena? And what was Roger hiding? As investigators dug deeper into the lives of these two people, one thing became clear: Sameena's disappearance was not a simple matter of love lost or a relationship gone wrong. There were far darker forces at play, and the answers lay buried in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The truth was closer than anyone realized. The investigation into Sameena Imam's disappearance took a chilling turn as more details about her final hours began to surface. According to Roger, their last interaction had been brief, a hurried goodbye, and then the cold distance that followed. He claimed that after their parting, Sameena had texted him, furious and frustrated. But was that truly the last conversation they'd ever have? Roger insisted that the text was the last he heard from her, a short but telling message that seemed to hold more questions than answers. In that message, Sameena's words were clear: "I'm fuming. I'm going where people really care about me." The text had left Roger with a sinking feeling. What did she mean by this cryptic declaration? Did she mean to suggest she had gone away with friends? Perhaps she had decided to escape for a while, leaving the chaos of her secret relationship behind. He assumed she might have gone to Birmingham or even to London, where she had family waiting for her. But this assumption was based purely on guesswork. There was no certainty, no confirmation. But as the investigation continued, the police discovered more unsettling facts. They pieced together Sameena's last known movements, retracing her steps in the days leading up to her disappearance. It was on Boxing Day that Sameena's family finally realized something was terribly wrong. They had eagerly anticipated her visit, but when Sameena didn't show up at her family's home in London, concern turned to dread. The festive cheer of Christmas had morphed into a suffocating silence. Sameena's family tried to reach her, but their calls went unanswered. Text messages received no reply. The festive season was supposed to bring them together, yet it only served to underscore the growing void left by her sudden disappearance. As the investigation pressed on, the police followed the faintest of leads, and it was through a combination of diligent detective work, CCTV footage, and an automated number plate recognition system that they stumbled upon a new clue. On January 4, 2015, a breakthrough came when they tracked down Sameena's BMW. The car was found parked in Luton, a city approximately 100 kilometers from Coventry, where Sameena had worked. The discovery was baffling. Why was her car parked there? Had Sameena, in a fit of defiance, decided to take an impromptu trip somewhere, perhaps using Luton Airport to escape? If she had, why hadn't she informed her loved ones of her plans? The questions swirled, yet no answers seemed forthcoming. But now the police had a new focal point. They had Sameena's car, and they had to uncover its secrets. But what they found inside only deepened the mystery. There were no suitcases, no handbags, no evidence of a trip. No sign of Samena's personal belongings, which would have been expected if she had truly gone away. There was nothing, except for the eerie absence of fingerprints. Every surface in the car appeared to have been wiped clean, meticulously scrubbed to ensure no trace of Sameena remained. Not on the steering wheel. Not on the gear stick. Not even on the door handles. The only explanation seemed to be that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to remove any trace of Sameena, almost as if the car had been sanitized, scrubbed free of evidence, of memories, of clues. What was most alarming, however, was the position of the driver's seat. Sameena, who stood at only 5 feet 2 inches, would never have been able to reach the pedals with the seat pushed so far back. It was clear, someone else had been behind the wheel. But who? The investigation had taken a dark turn. The police were no longer dealing with a simple case of a missing person. They were confronting a possible crime, one that involved deception, manipulation, and an attempt to erase all evidence of a crime. Someone had driven Sameena's car, and that someone was not her. But who could it be? And why would they go to such extreme lengths to cover their tracks? The breakthrough came when investigators dug deeper into Sameena's mobile phone records. They discovered a stunning truth. After her shopping trip on Christmas Eve, Sameena didn't head to Birmingham, where she had booked the hotel room. No, she had gone somewhere else entirely, a place that no one had anticipated, least of all Roger. In fact, Sameena's phone records revealed that she had made a stop not far from where her car had been found. She had gone to Luton, but not for the reasons anyone had imagined. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to align, but the picture they painted was anything but clear. There was a strange calm that had settled over the investigation at this point. Investigators felt they were on the brink of unraveling the truth, but every step forward seemed to lead to more questions, more dead ends. Each new revelation brought a sense of urgency, but also a sense of dread. Who was hiding the truth? Who was involved in Sameena's disappearance, and why had they gone to such lengths to cover their tracks? If you found this story compelling and want to stay up to date with more true crime content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps us bring more in-depth, researched stories to light. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. As the days passed, Sameena's family continued their frantic search. The festive season, which should have been filled with joy, had become a nightmare. Sameena's absence was felt keenly by her loved ones, and every passing day without answers seemed to stretch the tension to its breaking point. But what the police hadn't yet realized was that they were only scratching the surface of a much deeper and darker story, a story that would eventually reveal shocking truths about those closest to Sameena, about the secrets they had been keeping, and about the length some people would go to in order to protect themselves. Sameena had been hiding more than just a secret relationship. And now, it seemed, the truth was beginning to unravel, thread by thread, inch by inch. But would they be able to put together the pieces of the puzzle before it was too late? As the investigation into Sameena Imam's disappearance stretched into its second week, the authorities had already begun to uncover a tangled web of lies, secrets, and deception. They were closing in on something far darker than they had initially imagined. And now, new evidence pointed toward a chilling conclusion. Roger Cooper's actions had become even more suspicious with each passing day. But it wasn't just Roger whose movements were raising alarms. Something about his younger brother, David Cooper, seemed to be tied to Sameena's disappearance in ways that no one had anticipated. The investigators had a theory, but it was one they hoped they wouldn't have to confirm. Could both brothers be involved in Sameena's fate? The key to understanding the mystery lay in the strange coincidence of locations. On the day Sameena went missing, both Roger and David's phones had logged in at the same places at the same times. The records suggested they either drove separately but followed each other, or, more chillingly, they had traveled together in one car. Their destination? David's house in Leicester. When investigators arrived at David's home, they were immediately faced with an overwhelming challenge. David was a compulsive hoarder, collecting everything he could find that piqued his interest, most of which would be considered worthless junk to anyone else. The house was a labyrinth of discarded items, old newspapers, broken furniture, and piles of seemingly meaningless objects. The police were faced with the daunting task of navigating through this mess in search of any clue that could explain Samena's disappearance. But they didn't have to search long before they stumbled upon something damning. In the fridge, they found a bottle of Bolini, a bottle Sameena had bought on December 24th. It was an unexpected discovery, one that linked David directly to Sameena. But it was only the beginning of the strange chain of evidence that would continue to unfurl. The police then moved on to questioning David. His initial responses were disorienting, almost as if he was trying to distance himself from everything. When asked about Sameena, David feigned ignorance. "I've seen her a couple of times," he said, but when pressed for details, he seemed oddly vague. "She works with my brother. I wouldn't say they were in a relationship," he stammered, his eyes shifting nervously. The inconsistencies in his story only deepened as the interrogation continued. He claimed that the first time he met Sameena was when he saw her working at the warehouse. But when asked if he knew about the secret relationship between her and Roger, David gave an evasive answer, as though trying to distance himself from the reality of the situation. The investigation's pace quickened as more troubling details emerged. Sameena's chocolate, which she had bought on that fateful day, was found stashed away in a cupboard in David's kitchen. Her car's GPS, which had been used to track its final movements, was found hidden in the attic of his home. But perhaps the most telling clue came in the form of a train ticket. Tucked away in the pocket of David's car was a ticket from Luton to Leicester, dated January 4th, the very same day Sameena's car was discovered abandoned in Luton. Everything was starting to fall into place. The picture was no longer one of a missing persons case but of something far darker. The investigators were now convinced that Sameena had never gone on a holiday as Roger had initially assumed. Instead, they believed she had been driven to Leicester, where something had gone horribly wrong. But what exactly had happened to her? And why were both brothers seemingly involved in this twisted scenario? On January 4th, both Roger and David Cooper were arrested on suspicion of murder. The gravity of the situation began to sink in. As the police took them into custody, Roger vehemently denied any involvement in Sameena's death. His denials were almost automatic, as if he had rehearsed them 1,000 times. He insisted that he had nothing to do with Sameena's disappearance, that their relationship had ended long before the fateful events of Christmas Eve. He claimed that after their brief interaction on December 24th, he never saw Sameena again. He even said he had received the final text from her in which she expressed anger and frustration, but that was the last contact he had. David, however, remained eerily quiet. The investigators couldn't tell whether his silence was the result of guilt or fear, but one thing was becoming clear: there was more to this story than either of them were letting on. As the days passed, the police continued to piece together the evidence, and the mystery surrounding Sameena's disappearance deepened. They found nothing in her car that could explain her fate, no personal belongings, no signs of a struggle, just the unsettling cleanliness of a vehicle that had been carefully wiped down, as if someone had made a deliberate effort to erase any trace of her. The discovery of the train ticket, however, gave investigators the critical lead they needed. The route from Luton to Leicester was not a coincidence. It was a direct path, one that pointed towards something far more sinister than anyone had imagined. Could Sameena have been alive when she was taken to Leicester? Had she been forced into a car and driven away against her will? Or had she been part of something darker, something she hadn't shared with anyone? The mystery was only deepening, and the answers seemed farther away than ever. But even as the investigation unfolded, one question remained at the forefront of everyone's mind: why had Sameena been so desperate to escape her life? What had driven her to this point? And who could have wanted to silence her? The investigation was now at a critical juncture. The Cooper brothers, once thought to be innocent bystanders, were now at the heart of an increasingly complex and chilling case. The web of lies, deceit, and hidden motives was slowly unraveling, but the truth still remained just out of reach. Could the investigators uncover the final piece of the puzzle before it was too late? Or would the dark forces behind Samina's disappearance continue to remain hidden in the shadows, forever eluding justice? As each day passed, the pressure mounted, and the sense of urgency grew. The case had already captivated the local community, and now it was gaining national attention. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened to Sameena Imam. And who, if anyone, would be held accountable for the tragedy that had unfolded? With no answers in sight, the investigation was about to take a turn that would change everything. But for now, the mystery remained. And with every unanswered question, the suspense only continued to build. The investigation into the disappearance of Sameena Imam had already spiraled into a perplexing maze of lies and half-truths, but the shocking revelations that emerged in the wake of the Cooper brothers' involvement would soon take the case into uncharted, chilling territory. It was December 24th, the evening of Christmas Eve, when Roger Cooper's story began to take on a darker tone. After finishing his workday, Roger drove straight to his younger brother David's house. The brothers shared a deep bond, not only because of their family ties but also due to their shared passion for Star Wars. Roger had bought David a collection of limited edition Star Wars figurines as a Christmas present, an act of brotherly affection that would later be marred by unimaginable consequences. Roger spent over an hour at David's home, talking and reminiscing, before finally leaving to return to his own house in Coventry. He claimed to have spent the remainder of the holiday period at home, with his family, and had not left the house after that evening. His alibi was solid, his family could confirm his whereabouts, and Roger maintained that he knew nothing about Samina's disappearance. However, the investigators were about to discover that this narrative was not as clear-cut as Roger wanted them to believe. In a twist that would leave the investigators stunned, items belonging to Sameena were found in David's home. A bottle of her favorite perfume, a scarf she had worn on her last day at work, and several personal items she would never have left behind. Each discovery pointed directly to the younger brother. Despite his insistence on being uninvolved, it was impossible for David to deny the connection to Samina's vanishing. David's version of events was nothing short of bizarre and, to the seasoned investigators, incredibly suspect. According to David, right after Roger left his house that Christmas Eve, someone knocked at the door. David, assuming it was Roger returning for some forgotten item, opened it. But it wasn't Roger at the door, it was Sameena. David knew Sameena by sight but claimed he didn't know her name. She asked him about Roger, where he was, and why she couldn't see him. David, irritated and generally opposed to the intrusion of strangers, did not invite her in. But Sameena, determined and undeterred, pushed her way into his home and sat down on the sofa. A simple encounter was beginning to spiral into something much darker, and David had no idea how to stop it. David's next move would have deadly consequences. Having served in the military, David had access to a number of unusual items, one of which was a vial of chloroform. In a decision that would haunt him forever, David claimed he thought this was the perfect opportunity to use it. He reasoned that by rendering Sameena unconscious, he would give Roger the time he needed to escape from her. But the situation quickly spiraled out of control. David soaked a kitchen towel in the chloroform and held it over Samina's face, hoping to incapacitate her long enough for Roger to flee. But the outcome was far from what he expected. The small, 34-year-old woman didn't stand a chance. Sameena fell unconscious within moments, and, according to David's own testimony, she never regained consciousness. What had started as an ill-conceived plan to buy time turned into a tragedy far more sinister. David's claim was that he never intended to kill Sameena. Her death, he insisted, was an accident. But the investigators were not so easily convinced. As David realized Sameena was no longer breathing, panic set in. In a desperate attempt to cover up the crime, he wrapped her lifeless body in a sleeping bag. He then called a friend, a man named Ben, whom David claimed was supposed to dispose of the body. But when asked for details about what happened next, David's story became even more incoherent. He didn't know where Samina's body was disposed of, only that it had been left somewhere in the woods. However, just days later, David changed his story again. This time, He claimed that he had gone outside to move the car and, upon his return, found Sameena already dead. The inconsistencies in his account were glaring, and investigators began to grow skeptical of his ever-changing narrative. The turning point came when the authorities unearthed an explosive detail. In early December, just weeks before Sameena's disappearance, David had purchased a vial of 200 milliliters of chloroform on eBay. The purchase was made shortly after Roger had left David's house on December 24th. This crucial piece of evidence could not be ignored. Why would David have bought chloroform in such large quantities, and why had he specifically chosen that substance? The investigators now suspected that the events of Christmas Eve had been far more premeditated than David was admitting. Despite David's increasingly unconvincing explanations, the police still lacked concrete evidence about the fate of Sameena's body. They were certain that something sinister had occurred, but the location of her body remained a mystery, until a breakthrough came on January 16th. A tip-off arrived from an anonymous source who claimed to know where Sameena's body might be hidden. The caller's information led the police to an area of land owned by David Cooper. The moment they began digging on the lot, they unearthed a chilling discovery, a body wrapped tightly in plastic. The remains were unmistakably those of Sameena Imam. The body, badly decomposed, had been left in a remote area, hidden away in an attempt to cover up the crime. But despite the horrific condition of the body, the evidence was irrefutable. Sameena Imam had met a tragic, untimely end, and her killers had been trying to erase every trace of her existence. The moment the body was identified, the full weight of David and Roger Cooper's actions came crashing down. The investigation, which had started with questions of a missing person, had now escalated into a double-layered horror story, a story of betrayal, manipulation, and calculated murder. The brothers were arrested, and the case began to take a final, grim shape. Roger Cooper continued to deny any involvement in Sameena's death. He insisted that he had no idea what had happened to her and continued to cling to his alibi. But as more and more evidence emerged, his denials grew increasingly hollow. David, on the other hand, appeared to crumble under the pressure. His original claims of an accidental death no longer held water, and the police began to piece together the gruesome truth. There had been no accident. This had been a cold-blooded act of violence, driven by jealousy, secrecy, and a twisted plan gone horribly wrong. As the trial loomed on the horizon, the full story of Sameena Imam's tragic fate began to unfold. What had initially appeared to be a case of a missing woman had turned into a shocking tale of manipulation, murder, and cover-up, one that would haunt the investigators for years to come. The body of Sameena Imam, once a vibrant woman full of life and hope, was found deep in the earth, wrapped in a sleeping bag, and buried in a hole. It was as though someone had tried to erase all traces of her existence. The discovery, however, would do the opposite. It would expose the chilling reality behind her disappearance. The body was unearthed and presented to Sameena's family for identification. As they gazed upon the lifeless remains of their beloved, their worst fears were confirmed. This was indeed Sameena, the woman who had been missing for over 3 weeks. The shock, the grief, and the horror of it all weighed heavily on them. But the eerie details surrounding her final resting place only added to the unease. In the shed on the property where her body had been buried, a haunting sign hung on the wall. It read, "Don't wind me up, I'm running out of places to hide the bodies." It was a chilling reminder that the Cooper brothers, in their twisted game, had underestimated how far their depravity would take them. Despite the body being found on land owned by one of the brothers, both Roger and David Cooper denied any involvement in Sameena Imam's murder. Their claims, however, would soon unravel. Investigators, with the help of digital evidence, including phone records, CCTV footage, and automatic number plate recognition data, painstakingly pieced together the most likely sequence of events. What they discovered painted a sordid and deeply disturbing picture of deception and betrayal. Roger Cooper had promised Sameena that he would leave his partner Susan and be with her. He had even promised that their relationship would soon be official. However, in an ironic twist, Sameena was completely unaware that, at the end of November 2014, Roger and Susan had bought a new house together, signaling an unspoken commitment to the woman who had been by his side for over a decade. Roger had been living a double life, promising Sameena a future while secretly preparing for another one with his long-term partner. A man intent on leaving his relationship is unlikely to make such a significant investment, and yet, Roger had done just that, showing just how far he was willing to go to maintain his facade. But Roger's secrets didn't end there. His affair with Sameena had not been his only betrayal. Just 6 months before Sameena's tragic death, he had begun another affair with a woman named Cade Sweeney, a fellow employee at the warehouse where both Roger and Sameena worked. This short but intense relationship resulted in Cade becoming pregnant, though the couple ultimately decided to terminate the pregnancy. Roger had managed to juggle 3 women, his long-term partner, his lover Sameena, and now Cade, and he was determined to keep them all in the dark about one another. To him, this arrangement seemed perfect. But when Sameena, ever persistent, gave him an ultimatum, his carefully constructed life began to crumble. The pressure of keeping his secrets from his long-term partner Susan, along with the possibility of losing his stable job as a manager at Costco, pushed Roger to his breaking point. He feared that if the affair with Sameena became public, he would lose everything: his partner, his job, and his carefully curated reputation. Thus, investigators believed Roger's motive for wanting Sameena dead was clear: to prevent her from exposing their affair and, in doing so, to protect both his relationship with Susan and his professional career. The toxic combination of jealousy, fear of exposure, and a desire to maintain control over his life seemed to drive him to the darkest of decisions. But this wasn't the first time Roger had tried to silence Sameena. A mere 12 days before her death, on December 12, a Christmas party for Costco employees had been held. Sameena had stayed at a hotel in Century, a place where she was a regular guest. Roger, claiming he had a surprise for her, also booked a room at the same hotel. But he never showed up. Instead, his brother David was waiting in a rented car in the hotel parking lot, ready to execute their prearranged plan. According to their twisted scheme, David was supposed to use chloroform to incapacitate Sameena when she arrived, making her an easy target for their lethal intentions. The brothers communicated throughout the night, but not in any ordinary way. They used Star Wars quotes as a coded language to avoid leaving any incriminating evidence behind. A seemingly innocent reference to their shared love of the film franchise became their mask of deception, a way to hide the true gravity of their actions. But luck was not on their side that night. Sameena's car broke down, and she arrived at the hotel by taxi instead, safely checking in without encountering David. The opportunity was lost, and David sent his brother a text message in broken French, cryptically informing him that their target had disappeared. It was a plan thwarted, but not forgotten. The brothers regrouped, undeterred by the failed attempt, and set their sights on a second opportunity. Less than 2 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, Sameena and Roger left work separately, but not for long. Sameena, likely under the assumption that she and Roger were heading to a hotel in Birmingham, eventually got into his car. Roger likely spun a web of lies, telling her that they would stop by his brother David's house in Leicester to exchange gifts before heading off for their private rendezvous. They arrived at David's house at 5:07 p.m. and Roger left just over an hour later, at 6:25 p.m. heading back towards Coventry. It was during that window, investigators believe, that Sameena was killed. How exactly it happened remains unclear, but forensic evidence revealed something truly shocking. Sameena's body showed traces of a bizarre combination of metallic elements: antimony, cadmium, tin, mercury, and arsenic. Toxicologists believe that these substances, in liquid form, were likely injected into her body after death. It was as if the brothers had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that her death would leave no trace of its true cause. After Sameena was dead, Roger went home, seemingly unfazed by the crime he had just committed. To further cover his tracks, he sent a text message from her phone to himself, attempting to create the illusion that she was still alive. It was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to delay the inevitable discovery of her murder. Meanwhile, David, now deeply involved in the plot, was tasked with the grim job of disposing of her body. Within hours, Samena's body was gone, hidden from the world once more, but the detectives were closing in. They had pieced together the twisted reality behind the brothers' actions, and it was only a matter of time before they would be held accountable for the horrific crime they had orchestrated. The story of betrayal, deception, and calculated murder had reached its devastating conclusion, leaving behind a trail of destruction that would haunt the Cooper brothers for the rest of their lives. After the brutal murder of Sameena Imam, her body was buried in a remote corner of his property in Leicester, hidden away from the world. However, there was still one major issue left for the Coopers to address: Sameena's car, which was parked in Coventry. David, ever the accomplice, took it upon himself to clean up the final traces of their crime. He drove her car to Leicester, meticulously scrubbing every inch of it to ensure no fingerprints remained. Once the vehicle was spotless, he drove it to Luton and returned home by train, all the while careful to maintain the illusion that nothing was amiss. The brothers, calculating and cold-hearted, believed they had covered every detail. They were convinced they had left no evidence that could connect them to Sameena's staged disappearance. But they underestimated the skill and perseverance of the English detectives on their trail. The evidence, once pieced together, would not remain hidden for long. The murder trial of Sameena Imam began at the end of August 2015, in Birmingham. Neither Roger nor David Cooper confessed to the heinous act, but the overwhelming evidence was impossible to deny. The jury, after considering the facts and testimony, found both men guilty of the brutal murder of the 34-year-old woman. Sameena, who had been betrayed by someone she loved deeply, someone she trusted more than anything, had dreamed of escaping the shadows and finding happiness. Christmas, for her, had promised a new beginning, a fresh chapter in her life. But instead, it would be the day she was taken from the world forever, a tragic twist of fate that stole her future in an instant. On October 25, 2015, Roger and David Cooper were sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison. They accepted their sentences with cold, emotionless faces, showing no remorse for the life they had taken. While Roger had a clear motive to kill his lover to protect his double life, the question that haunted many was why David, his brother, had chosen to take part in such a despicable crime. Why did he help his brother kill a woman he didn't even know? That question remains unanswered, lingering in the minds of all who followed the tragic case. The impact of Sameena's death on her family was nothing short of devastating. They were not prepared for the news that would forever alter their lives. For weeks, they had lived in hope, praying for Sameena's safe return, clinging to the belief that their daughter, their sister, was still out there somewhere. They missed the cheerful, vibrant Sameena, the woman who had always been there to offer advice and encouragement. She had her whole life ahead of her, a life that was taken brutally by the hands of someone she trusted. In a heart-wrenching tribute to his daughter, Sameena's father, Imam Dean, spoke of the profound loss that had shaken their entire family. Sameena was very special to me and my wife. I could talk for days about Sameena and what she meant to us, to her sisters, brother, nieces, nephews, family, and friends. It breaks our hearts that we cannot have her back home where she should be. As a family, we are absolutely devastated by the loss of Sameena. Nothing could have ever prepared us for hearing from the police that they believed our daughter had been murdered. We were praying and hoping that Sameena was still alive, holding on to any tiny bit of hope we could. We kept believing the police were wrong, but deep down, you begin to feel that she's gone, and you start to grieve. It's hard to even imagine that such a kind, innocent, and beautiful girl could be murdered, let alone our daughter. We are still in shock, and we miss Sameena in so many different ways. Everything in our life and future has been affected, even to the point where we worry about the safety of our other children and grandchildren, wondering if they will be safe when they go out. Sameena's younger brother, Imran Imam, also shared his anguish with the world. In a statement released by the West Midlands Police, he expressed the torment he had felt since his sister's death. The circumstances in which Sameena was murdered plague me greatly. I constantly think about her last moments, her final thoughts and fears. Sameena was not just my sister, she was a mentor, a guide, and a counselor during difficult times. I will never be able to seek her advice again. I am forever reminded of her loss, with constant triggers to memories of her life. Worse still are the triggers that link her death to places I now associate with her murder, like certain road signs and locations. The weight of it all is unbearable. The trial may have concluded, and the guilty men may have been sentenced, but for Samina's family, the pain is unrelenting. The dream of a future that was once filled with promise for Sameena has been replaced by a haunting grief that will never fully fade. Her murder, carried out by those she trusted, will remain a tragedy that echoes through the lives of those who loved her. As the years go by, the wounds inflicted by her brutal death will continue to bleed, and the Cooper brothers, locked away in prison, will have to live with the consequences of their actions. But for Samina's family, no sentence, no matter how long, can ever bring back the daughter, sister, and friend they lost. Her memory, though, will live on in their hearts forever, a reminder of the love she gave and the life she should have had. If you found this story compelling and want to stay up to date with more true crime content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps us bring more in-depth, researched stories to light. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.